Under the night, the sound of the pattering rain was engulfed by the sound of the huge waves. The splashing waves slapped a dilapidated multi-masted sailing ship that was docked on the shore. Like a flock of vultures hovering over the dead for a long time. Hungry, revelry, shudder. For the Via pirates who drifted aimlessly in the East China Sea, this small island that they came across by chance means a feast. When the pirates who have been drifting on the sea for half a month set foot on this small island, they are destined to become a group of hungry beasts, howling wildly, roaring, waving all kinds of low-quality but powerful weapons that are enough to kill people, as if they couldn't vent the overflowing depression in their hearts. This is a complex emotion that they can't understand in their lack of thinking. I smelled the unique smell of berry, as well as the intoxicating aroma of wine, oh, yes, and the full bodies of women. Captain Via, who wore a black brim, held a dark black the crutch of the sword, the brown boots stepped on the place of the sword in step, even the black knight could not cover the greed in his eyes. Oh, yes, I heard your impatient breathing. The desire to kill and plunder is roaring in our blood. We are the mighty Via pirates, and we ride the wind and waves to this island. Every time Captain Via's mobilization order is almost the same, but every time I hear it again, it is still as exciting as the first time. The blood is full, and the pirates below are holding their heavy breaths, congested with blood. The eyes are getting crueler. Captain We raised the brim of his hat and looked at his crew, completely unaware that there was an indiscernible arc hidden in one of his lips. There was a hint of mockery in the coldness. He waved and roared vigorously, "Go and bring back all the wealth on this island, my crew, start your carnival." Ho ho ho! The tranquility of the island was completely torn apart, and dozens of pirates screamed and dispersed, running towards the panicked light in the center of the island. "Yarlin, what are you dawdling about? Did you even burn out your brain after a serious illness? If you don't catch up quickly, Barry will be taken away by others." Fick looked at himself in Via High, the closest pirate companion in the pirate group. His eyes are full of doubts. Since Yarlin woke up with a high fever 2 months ago, there has been an indescribable change, and he has become a little dull. You must know that before every time the captain gave an order, Yarlin always wanted to rush to the first one, but the other party has fallen behind in recent times. Damn it! Fick quickly put his doubts behind him, leaving only anxiety because unknowingly the other pirates had almost disappeared, which means that if nothing else happens, they will have nothing to do this time. A decent harvest, especially after most of the looted wealth has to be turned over to the captain. Don't worry, Fick. The hoarse voice with a slight cough, as if a walnut was stuck in the throat, showed the weakness of lack of breath. While speaking, the curve that the owner of the voice had just raised at the corner of the mouth flattened, and it was the front. The indifferent thin lips hidden in the darkness, and then gradually revealed a pale face without too much blood. The blue pupils in the narrow and long eyes reflected Fick's anxious expression. The scarred flesh looked even more ferocious. When you're in a hurry, the scars on your face will become even uglier. Yarlin licked the wet and white lips soaked by the rain, and chased after the shadow of the pirate that could still be seen in the distance. Go! Fick's cheeks twitched violently. Damn bastard, this scar was left for you to block the knife. He chased after him and cursed viciously, with a hint of remorse in his eyes, but in an instant he was brutally attacked. Firmness is replaced in the bottom of my heart. Although we are all vicious pirates, Yarlin is my best brother. If he doesn't block a knife for him, Yarlin's fragile head will be chopped to pieces. Take me a scar, it's not a loss for him, and besides, the pirates are originally the more vicious they are, the more popular they are. The emotional changes on Fick's face could not be hidden from Yarlin. He pursed his lower lip and grinned. Wait, all the berry you grab is yours. Humph! Lo, those from Gansiver are rushing ahead. You think they will give us something else? Having said that, Fick still laughed. Couldn't be more correct. If you rush fast, you may not be able to grab the most, and if you fall behind, it doesn't mean you will gain nothing. The most important thing is to find the target. View. That bright is the raging light of the flames. Half of the formituri arched door at the entrance of the town is burning, and the other half is shrinking and scorching. The black smoke converges on the top of the head along the twisted wood grain. Erlin's eyes looked strangely like a scorched and deformed dead man. Inside was the chaotic wailing and the hysterical arrogance of the thugs, as well as the smell that even the rain and thick smoke could not hide. The outline of On Earth has clearly emerged in Yerlin's mind, bright and dazzling. Even though his hands had been stained with many lives and blood in his previous life, Yerlin still frowned fiercely, while his left hand, which was hidden in the linen glove, was tightly clenched into a ball. It seemed that there was another sound contained in that sound. More dull, more depressing, and urgent. Target? What do you mean? Fick didn't understand Yerlin's meaning. He looked at the man who resisted the murder in the town, the woman who was dragged to the ground in despair, and the child who was kneeling on the ground with blank eyes. In the center, a slender monkey-like pirate was staring at them coldly, and at his feet were bags of blood-stained berry. Damn it, Gansiver must have left us not a single berry. Fick cursed. Look, the idiot Fick and his sick child are here. Gansiver kicked the woman who was kneeling on the ground and kowtowed. Next to the woman was a teenage boy whose eyes were frightened and empty. Terrified. Who are you calling an idiot? You ugly, dirty, shameless stinky monkey, kneeling and licking rose chrysanthemum. Fick's retort was vicious. Oh, my God, Yerlin, look at Gansiver's cheeks turning into its red. You reading www.uuganshu.com is as red as a monkey's butt. I'm going to kill you. Gansiver's thin body screamed like a woman, kill him for me, I'm going to tear his mouth apart. The 5 pirates surrounding Gansiver stared at Fick, the killing intent in their eyes undisguised, as if they would rush up in the next moment to smash Fick and Yerlin into pieces. In the Via Pirates, only the captain has the power to execute crew members, and other crew members are not allowed to fight privately. Do you want to be stripped off by the captain and soaked in seawater in a bucket? Not far away, a few footsteps approached in a hurry. The first person was shaped like a brown bear. It was the second character of the Via Pirates, First Officer Lowe. Gansiver's voice seemed to be stopped abruptly by a male duck pinching his throat. His twinkling pupils seemed to recall a terrifying scene, and the faces of the surrounding pirates were also extremely ugly. On the Via Pirates, the captain's will cannot be violated, no one dares to challenge the captain's authority hidden, and everyone is reluctant to restrain their killing intent. Gather all the berries and drinks, send them back to the boat in groups, and spread out in groups of 2 to continue searching the town, don't miss any corner, any piece of berry. Lowe stared coldly. He glanced at Fick, and then glanced at Yerlin without any emotion, his eyes seemed to be looking at 2 dead people. Yerlin didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. He watched Lowe leave with unusually calm eyes, and watched Gansiver vent his anger and kill the woman under his feet before leaving. What Gansiver didn't notice was that the moment he turned around, a strange black light flashed in Yerlin's pupils, he suppressed the dryness in his throat, and whispered in a non-human voice, "It should be eat." The unique fragrance of the death of the fresh body stimulated the taste buds of Yerlin to secrete a lot of saliva. The soul struggling on the warm corpse escaped the breath of resentment, begging, and despair, which tasted more than anything in the world. A condiment. The surrounding pirates headed towards the depths of the town like locusts passing through, leaving behind ruins and flames. Black smoke obscured Yerlin's face, and the pupils contracted and trembled into a vertical line, which was very characteristic of some cold-blooded animals. Fick, search those rooms again, maybe there is something left. Yerlin lowered his head and walked towards the woman's body. The hoarse and repressed voice carried some kind of palpitating strangeness. Fick swallowed the rebuttal from his mouth and walked towards the door that was knocked open in the distance. Voice. Yerlin looked at the woman's corpse lying in a pool of blood, a pair of dead eyes staring at the sluggish child, his expression fixed on the face of despair and nostalgia. Touching the woman's skin through the glove, the remaining warm touch and twisted emotions made his fingertips tremble, and the entire leather glove oscillated into countless thin strips like dead branches, as if there was something under the glove. The living creature woke up and couldn't wait to choose someone to devour. Astubator, be quiet. Yerlin took off his black linen gloves and stared intently at his left hand, which looked like a living creature. His left hand seemed to sense the danger and warning in his eyes, and he slowly and difficultly became quiet. In this way, his left hand finally revealed the whole picture calmly. It was a black blood line, like a dense tattoo covering the entire back of the hand. Starting from the 5 fingernails, countless black lines spread and entangle, like countless tree whiskers twisted and entangled. The fingers finally spiraled together on the back of the hand into a pitch-black ring. On the opposite side of the back of the hand facing the ring, a black vertical line split the texture of the entire palm in two. The black line, the circles are one front and one reverse, one in front and one behind, and they overlap to form a vertical eye, tightly closed, just like Yerlin's eyes at the moment. He called it a stervile. The index finger was cold and not warm. It pressed against the center of the woman's eyebrows, and slowly and firmly slid down. The black line between the fingers suddenly came alive again. The black line spread rapidly on the woman's face, and the dense lines started from the eyebrows. The spindle covered the woman's body until Yerlin's index finger slid to the woman's chest, and all the black threads were gathered here in an instant. The center of the eyebrows, the location of the pineal gland, where the soul resides, the chest, where the heart is, the source of physical life. Beginning with the eyebrows and ending with the heart, this is a completeness. I'm hungry. Yerlin licked his slightly dry lips. Accurately speaking, a stir badger is hungry? Oh, it doesn't matter, the important thing is that the taste of hunger is so unpleasant. I have endured it for 2 months, now I am very weak, my face is very pale, I can't sleep every day, if I don't eat, I will die. He has killed people in his previous life, but he has never done such a serious thing as cannibalism. The psychological obstacles are not that easy to overcome. Yerlin muttered to himself at the woman's corpse, and he was trying to understand himself. Feeling the temperature on the woman's body gradually getting colder, Yerlin's index finger trembled even more. Food is not fresh when it is cold. In exchange for the first meal, woman, I promise you that I will take revenge for you, and they will be reunited with you soon. Yerlin clenched his fingers suddenly, and the spindle woven by the black thread was pulled and shrunk. With just one breath, the woman's body and soul were all annihilated, turning into a wriggling black dot and blending into the black line. The black line thinned and converged back to the back of the hand, and everything returned to calm. Hey! He stood up with a long sigh of relief, his face softened a lot, and his pupils with vertical lines returned to normal. It looks like it's not as I thought. The ground is very clean, except for a pool of blood stains, there is not a single drop of meat scum. It is a laudable quality to cherish food. Can you simplify the ritual and make eating easier, Asturbator? There was no response from his left hand. It was as peaceful as if everything that happened just now was just Yerlin's imagination. Yerlin pouted and put on his gloves. Then, the corners of his mouth grinned, and a text message transformed from an idea suddenly appeared in his mind. Asturbator, with the fall of the gods, he was born from the dead wreckage of the abyss, the last resurrection of the endless abyss. He is Asturbator, the corpse of the mythical era, the mother nest of alienation and flesh, the lord who brought death and slavery. All living beings wherever he passed became his slaves, and all civilizations were devoured by him to become his nourishment. He was the most terrifying natural disaster in countless cosmic epochs. He was long-winded. Be brief. The words stopped abruptly. He seemed to hear Aegeao's hum sound. The words in his mind were shattered like glass, and there was probably the sound of the broken heart of glass. The new text emerges quickly, short and perfunctory. Asturbator, the brute of alienation and flesh, the master who brings death and slavery. The broken seed, devour all flesh and blood into nutrients for your own growth. Complete species in the next stage. Transformation, transform the dead creatures into their own servants. The servants at this stage have no autonomous consciousness and can only accept the simplest instructions. Absorb, it can absorb the flesh and blood essence of the same kind of life body to strengthen its basic quality. Yerlin squinted his eyes, his mind quickly turned to think about the meaning of each word, making sure that he did not miss or misunderstand. In the first time, he will cross-analyze the obtained information and his own situation, so as to control the advantages and disadvantages to the greatest extent, and try to deduce and optimize the possible future. This is his instinct. Even if he passes through after changing the body, this instinct is still unforgettable. Even in the last life, this ability finally pushed him to prison and the death penalty, but it will not happen again in this life. When Yerlin was thinking, he habitually touched his eyebrows, and the still cold touch through the glove made him shudder, and put away his thoughts. Black Finger is officially launched, the point is that you can finally get a good night's sleep tonight. Damn it, I didn't find anything except a pile of broken wood. Fick came over angrily, stunned for a moment, and asked, "Where's the woman's body?" Stiffly, he turned his neck to find the corpse that should exist on the ground. Apparently not found. Then he seemed unsure of what he saw in a trance, until his stiff eyes focused on the black glove of Yerlin's left hand. He paused, and then suddenly jumped up from the ground as if stimulated by some kind www novel. A vague scream came out of his mouth, like a mad little beast crashing into Arlen. Yerlin kicked the boy's abdomen mercilessly sideways. The boy fell to the ground and couldn't get up. He swallowed and screamed. He raised his head and stared at Yerlin and Fick with hatred. "Hey, kid, I didn't kill your mother." Fick showed a fierce expression. "Nice eyes." Yerlin walked over with a blank expression, crouched down and held the boy's head with his right hand. "Remember this feeling of hatred, it can keep you alive." The boy's eyes widened and he stared at Yerlin, as if to imprint this villain's face into his soul. Yerlin was indifferent. He raised his hand lightly to knock the boy unconscious, stood up and walked into the dark woods in the distance like carrying a dead dog, found a sunken pothole and threw him into it, then turned and walked away. "Go back. Yerlin, you have become merciful, you saved that kid's life." Fick looked at Yerlin curiously. "That kid will sleep until we all leave, of course, if there is no food, he will still be hungry." "Die. Benevolence." Yerlin sneered. "Fick, you are wrong, life is more cruel than death." "Life is crueler than death." Fick chewed this sentence carefully. When did this pirate hear such philosophical words? His eyes lit up. "This sentence is really great. If when I die, someone must engrave these words on my tombstone." Pirates' brain circuits are really different. "I don't know if you will have a tombstone when you die." Yerlin looked at the pirates who were scavenging for wealth in the distance, and said coldly, "But if we don't act again, this time we may really will die." The rain didn't stop overnight, and on the muddy soil, the pirates seemed to breed and wriggle maggots, picking up wealth and food, filling their ugly and bloated belly. Not a single trace is left. "Gansiver, what kind of person do you think our captain is?" Rose stood in the rain. His black eyes under his lowered hat became more and more dark and gloomy. "Powerful? Cruel?" Gansiver opened his mouth, feeling that the rain-soaked clothes were a little cold. No, neither." Roll licked his lips and sneered, "These are just Captain Via's methods. The purpose is for his greed that can never be filled, like a dog that can never get enough to eat. Hyena, every time we loot the wealth we bring back, we can only keep a little bit, and he doesn't have to do anything, not even get off the boat, just wait quietly at the bow. Those idiots will be well behaved, move all the wealth into the captain's room. And after that, don't try to take a berry out of the captain's pocket at all." Lo made a funny laugh, but in Gansiver's eyes, it became more and more dangerous and hideous. "That's right. What's the name of the unlucky guy who was skinned and hanged by the captain last month?" "Sens." Gansiver swallowed and spit. "He only fought because he was on the boat." Everyone thinks so, hee hee. Lo interrupted Gansiver, actually, it was because he stole into the captain's room and took a bottle of ale and a pocket watch. Silence. Gansiver was shocked and silent. After a brief silence, Lo patted Gansiver on the shoulder, and said meaningfully, stealing the captain's wealth will be flayed, and then Fick and Yalan have basically achieved nothing for the past 2 months. On the pirate ship, even a dog must bring wealth to the captain, otherwise it will only become a pot of dog meat. Because eating free food is also stealing the captain's wealth. Guru. Gansiver swallowed, his vocal cords trembling, so, Fick and Yerlin will be hanged by the captain. That's right, based on what I know about the captain, 2 months is the limit for him to endure. Rose's eyes swept across Gansiver's face, and he looked at the looming shadows of trees in the distance. It was as if a greedy hyena was opening its mouth in the darkness, the stench of saliva mixed with the rain on this rainy night. In that direction, the hull shook and creaked, and Captain Wee stood on the bow and looked up at the dark rain curtain. It's been 2 years, it's almost there, and it's the last bit, I can. The rain hit his round eyes, cold, ruthless, without a trace of human temperature. In the woods, on the muddy soil slope, the footsteps were deep and shallow. Yerlin walked in front of him with a hunched waist, and Fick followed. Hearing Yerlin's intermittent inferences made his face more and more ugly. Captain Via, he won't. Fick hesitated. Yerlin climbed up the soil slope. The soil under his feet was relatively high. Looking down from here, he could see most of the outline of the town. For a long while, the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, revealing a cold fox line. Then he turned his head and met Fick's dodging eyes. In Captain Via's eyes, we are his domesticated hyenas, he gave us bones, we brought him back trophies, and when this hyena eats nothing, do you think Captain Via will turn it into a pot of dog meat? Maybe I guessed wrong, maybe our captain is really generous. Yerlin patted Fick on the shoulder, his tone still calm. Then guess, will our first mate Lo forgive me? Your collision with him today. Fart. Fick's face suddenly flushed. I don't need his forgiveness. Gansiver is a whore/adopted son, and Lo is a complete villain, bastard. Looks like you've figured it out. Yerlin retracted his palm and sighed. Unfortunately, Barry has all entered the pirate's pocket, so for the sake of our own lives, we can only reluctantly rob our companions. Already? You have no regrets? You were prepared to rob your own people from the very beginning. Fick was stunned. He looked down at the ant-like pirates below, and finally understood why Yerlin had to climb here just now. He spat fiercely, damn Yarlin, you hypocritical bastard! Isn't robbery all about blackmailing you? Yerlin shrugged his shoulders and smiled brightly. What do you think of Bill? Fick followed the position pointed by Yalan. Outside the stone wall on the western edge of the town, the bald Bill walked out with a sack and 2 other pirates. It seemed that he was preparing for the return trip, and he had gained a lot. Crunch! 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 The sound of footsteps stepping on the muddy water is from far to near. Judging from the sound of footsteps, it is 3 people. The rain is still heavy. It seems that it does not stop tonight. The surrounding bushes are mixed with night and rain to form a perfect cover. Erlin and Fick lay there motionless. Bill, William, Chart. Fick lowered his voice, they're all Lo's son of a bitch. Yerlin was crawling on the ground without hearing Fick's voice. There was a momentary daze in his eyes. He recalled the first time he smuggled in his previous life. The beginning of 2 lives is the same. He put away his thoughts and laughed at himself. Sure enough, he is not a good person by nature. www.mentalnovel.com. His eyes became cold, his attention was highly concentrated. He took out a short knife in his right hand, and a glove in his left hand. I don't know when it has been taken off, and the black fingers are stuck in the soil. Quiet, quiet. That man dared to resist just now. He was as skinny as a monkey, his head was chopped in half with a knife, and then the people next to him shivered like a quail. Bill boasted loudly about his bravery. There was a tooth mark on the back of Chet's left hand while touching his crotch. He cursed vulgarly as he walked. Combined with the hair sticking to the blood-stained rust axe in his right hand, it was not hard to imagine how cruel it was just now. One scene. Damn, I have to turn in so much this time. The first mate is right. We can't even drink the soup with we. William's voice was low and resentful. How long will we wait for this kind of day? The vice president said it was fast. I just had enough. Shut up. Bill's eyes widened and he roared, be careful, if it gets to the captain's ears, you will kill us. After speaking, Bill restrained his emotions. He glanced around, no one was seen, and his voice softened. The first officer whispered to me in private that he was about to discover the captain's secret, and that was the time of Via's death. And then the first mate becomes the captain, and our good days will come. Secret? William and Charter's eyes lit up at the same time. I don't know, the first mate didn't tell. Bill's voice stopped suddenly. Zilla, the voice was suddenly harsh, and I saw a short knife sticking to Bill's throat. From left to right, swipe away. It was like a silver bottle bursting with water, a cluster of cold light, blood splashing, and a face next to Bill's head exposed, standing side by side. It was Yerlin. Robbery, he said. The throat was cut off, and Bill subconsciously opened his mouth to make a leaking sound, and blood spurted out immediately, as if he couldn't wait to escape from this sinful body. Chet leaned closer, his face dripping with blood, but the remaining temperature made him suddenly shiver from head to toe. William leaned in a little later, his face was horrified, his eyes seemed to be locked, staring at him. Arlen's face. That face has always been as pale as a tuberculosis ghost, but today it suddenly became more bloody, and it looked so terrifying. Yarlin! Chet responded and yelled, but maybe because he was too shocked, his voice was a little distorted, are you crazy? Let go of Bill. Yarlin didn't respond. With his right hand he pulled back the dagger gently, and his left hand pushed it forward. Bill raised his head and covered his neck desperately with both hands, so blood seeped from his fingers, and a whimper sounded in his throat. The body slammed forward heavily on the ground. I killed you. The veins on Chiter's neck burst out, and he swung his axe towards Yerlin. Yerlin's pupils shrank slightly, his toes slammed hard, and Bill's body was thrown forward. Chet was furious, and the axe cast more than split Bill's body in half, and the body was separated like a rag sack. Chet rushed out with blood all over his body, his whole body like a galloping brown bear. Yerlin's expression was slightly stern. He quickly glanced at Bill's upper body that was slashed, and at the same time, he turned his feet, and he got into the bushes next to him. Want to run? Without any hesitation, Charter chased in with an axe. Chet, don't go. William looked at Chet's disappearing back with a gloomy expression. He stayed in place for 3 seconds, looking at Bill's corpse divided into two irritably, then he clenched his teeth and stomped his feet to chase after him. He also didn't notice that the back of Bill's upper body corpse, to be precise, the position of the back center, the dead flesh trembled strangely. There was some dirt stuck to the sackcloth, and the dirt was shaken to reveal a palm-sized piece of flesh. There were 4 small holes side by side on the necrotic flesh. The flesh around the finger hole began to vibrate, and then a black line drilled through the flesh from the inside, as if someone was threading a needle and thread through the flesh to perform a suture operation. Layers of dense black lines connected to the strangely growing granulation, and they were quickly pulling each other to heal. The corpse trembled even more violently. Suddenly, Bill's head lifted, his neck began to turn, white without eyes, the pupils are shaking, looking for something. At the next moment, the direction of his head turning was frozen, and it was the corpse of the lower body. In the bushes, Yarlin and Chart chased one after another, getting closer and closer, while William kept a certain distance and followed from a distance, not daring to get too close. Chet, be careful. William looked at the dark trees around him with vigilant eyes. Be careful of the trap, he can't be alone, Fick may be hiding around. Almost as soon as the voice fell, a black shadow suddenly sprang out from the side, like a cheetah swooping and clawing its teeth and claws, and like a cannonball suddenly jumping up from the ground and slamming into Chet's side. Bang! There was a heavy muffled sound, splashes of water and mud splashed, and the two rolled on the ground together in a ball. The axe let go and cut a ravine on the mud. Ah ah ah! Chet let out a howl of pain. During the rolling process, the bridge of his nose was hit by Fick's forehead, making a crackling sound. He was like a wounded beast, and blood seemed to drip from his fierce eyes. He went crazy. He struggled to break free from Fick's embrace, and the veins on his arms were all bulging. Get up for me! He swung his arms, and his clenched fists hit Fick's ribs and back all at once, making a muffled sound like a drum beat. Fick's face flushed red, and his mouth also roared like a beast, and his two arms just like two steel pliers locked Chatter's sturdy waist. His whole person was like a heavy iron lump, the whole person's weight was pressing on Chatter's chest, pressing the opponent to the ground and unable to move. There is no fancy dodge, only the purest brutality. The neck was raised up high, the scars on the cheeks were twitching, and the fierce light was exposed like a blood-stained skull hammer slamming down heavily. The final word. Bang crunch. The muffled sound is mixed with the strange crunchy sound, which makes people shudder. Blood splattered, and the fascia sticking together into filaments was mixed with broken bones and stubble. Fick let go of Chet's body, stood up, wiped a blood stain on his face with his sleeve, ho-ho with a smile like a ghost. All this is a long story, but in fact it is just a blink of an eye and one death and one injury, simple and rude, and does not give William any chance to respond to help. He only took a few steps under his feet, and then he could no longer move, but stopped. Forward, and then stepped back cautiously. Hey, William, are you going to drop Chat? Yerlin picked up the axe and frowned slightly. The strength of this body was really bad, and he vaguely felt a little tired. Helplessly threw the axe back to the ground, and Yerlin's eyes at William became fiery, drawing, absorbing the flesh and blood essence of similar life forms can strengthen his basic quality. When William met Yerlin's gaze, his heart suddenly froze. He couldn't describe the look in his eyes, which made people cold to the bone. It was not looking at the same kind, but the feeling of looking at food. Coveted, indifferent. Of course he couldn't imagine the terrible thoughts that flashed in Yerlin's mind at the moment, and, precisely because of the same reasons. Don't come here. William swayed the iron sword in his hand and slowly pulled back the distance from Yerlin, while squinting at Fick's movements. Oh, look, William is like a frightened rabbit. Yerlin said to Fick with an exaggerated smile, wiped the blood on his face and grin, you scared him. Fick obediently wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth www.mtlnovel.com and grinned, making his whole person even more terrifying. Hey, don't be nervous, I'm serious. Yerlin clapped his palms. Fick and I just wanted to grab something to get back to the ship for a good deal. Bill and Chet's death was just an accident, I didn't expect them both. With such a grumpy temper, unlike you William, I always think you are a very calm person, we can have a good talk with each other, and there is no need to hurt each other. William counted the safe distance between each other and frowned. He knew Yerlin's shameless reversal of black and white. He didn't run away immediately. Listen to what Arlen has to say. We're on the same boat, we're friends, aren't we? Yerlin said this and picked up the purse that fell on the ground. He moved calmly, his tone was even more slow, and he was sure of William. Appearance, friends should trust and understand each other. This is just an accident. You don't want to go back and complain, right? Aren't you afraid? William's whole body has been suppressed by Yerlin's aura. The calmer Yerlin is, the stronger William's inner unease will be. He forced himself to calm down and threatened, the captain will peel off your skins. Hanging from the mast. Oh? Are you sure we're going to be hung from the mast, not yourself? Arlen sneered, why do you think we killed Bill and Chart, just because of a little berry? My friend is good, think about the reasons for that. William was terrified, and the faint conjecture in his heart condensed into real fear at this moment. Looks like you've figured it out. Yerlin stared at William's change in expression, his voice long and heavy. It's the captain's order. William fell into an ice cave. Everyone is a born conspirator, especially when they are caught in it, they will weave the maliciousness between them to the fullest. William is no exception. There are all kinds of thoughts in his mind at the moment, and the brilliance of its deceitfulness and insidiousness is beyond anyone's imagination. Yerlin doesn't even need to say more. William will never tire of thinking about the loopholes on his own. Make up, and believe it. Captain, you all know. Of course. Yerlin stared at William and answered simply and concisely. William took a deep breath, panic and fear like a poisonous snake grabbing his heart, his eyes almost blacked out, and his voice was hoarse and weak. What should I do to beg the captain's forgiveness? Yerlin's eyes were rolling. Hey, go back and tell the mate in private immediately. What? What? William thought he had heard it wrong. Fick and I were instructed by the captain to quietly kill Bill and Chart, and tell Lo the whole thing. That's it. Yerlin's tone became a little impatient. This is also the captain's plan. You just do it. Plan. The two words Yerlin especially accentuated the tone. Sure enough, William's face was even paler. He couldn't understand the captain's plan, so he was even more sure of the authenticity of it, and became more and more afraid. Please tell the captain that I will do so. Yerlin waved his hand, as if he was too lazy to continue to pay attention to the other party. William's throat moved up and down, and he opened his mouth to speak, but he didn't say anything in the end. Instead, he took a few steps back and turned to leave the place quickly. Yerlin looked at William's disappearing back, and sighed in his heart that the human heart is just a piece of dirty mud. As long as the seeds of sin are planted at the right time, it can fertilize and irrigate by itself, germinate and grow vigorously. The smelly fruit, including himself. Yerlin. Fick's mind was muddled, and the expression on his face was both impatient and weird. Is it really the captain's order? When did you? Tisk, this IQ is really touching. Yerlin was stunned for a while, quite speechless. Of course I lied to him. Ah. Fick looked confused, and then became very anxious. You're crazy. Then you asked William to tell Lo, you. Yerlin stared faintly into the woods, where a faint connection came into his mind just now. He licked his lips, then turned to look at Fick, and said calmly, originally that's what I'm saying, the difference is that now William won't tell the captain, but will tell Lo, and in private. Seeing that Fick was puzzled but slowly became quiet, Yerlin slowly paced over, crouched beside Chat's body, and groped in his arms. If William speaks directly in front of the captain, then there is no room for quibble that Bill and Chat must pay for their lives, because Lo must kill us, and of course the captain must kill us both, and if William told Lo about it in private, then things get interesting. Fick scratched his head, not quite understanding this kind of twists and turns, but seeing the curvature of the corners of Yerlin's mouth, he slowly felt relieved. Then, why don't you just kill him? Fick stared at Yerlin suspiciously. Arlen pulled out the purse in Chat's arms, shaking the blood on it. It's so obvious, we killed people after all, and in the eyes of some people, it's quite appropriate for this basin to buckle on us. So how to deduct it and who deducts it is very important. He said and threw the money bag to Fick, and suddenly asked Fick a question with a very serious expression, a question that Fick had never thought about. Fick, do you want to be a pirate all the time? In this world, I don't want to be a pirate all my life, there is no future. Yerlin said to himself without waiting for Fick to answer, staring at Fick's eyes with a chill that made his heart palpitate. Mang. This incident can just be an opportunity to break away. What is lacking is just a little preparation time and 2 or 3 insignificant pieces. Not a pirate. Yerlin's eyes made him feel inexplicably frightened. His dark blue pupils were like the sea at night, and the shadow of the black dome was reflected in the calm. Fuzzy, deep, indifference devours everything. Yarlin, what do you want to do? Hee the low, unbridled laughter echoed in the sound of the pattering rain. Bill's body is gone. William turned back the same way, staring at the pool of black blood under his feet, where Bill's corpse that was cut into 2 pieces disappeared. Naturally, the dead will not move on their own, they can only be moved and removed by someone, so who could it be? He stared at the blood stains under his feet, and could see traces of dragging between the 2 pools of black blood. He speculated that someone should have dragged Bill's upper body to the lower body, and then carried them away together. After all, he is not a professional policeman, otherwise he would find the scene weird. There are several palm prints soaked in rain around the black blood. What's even more strange is the disappearance of the body, which is the original lower body of Bill's flying. At the location, the surroundings were empty, and there was only a row of leaving footprints from the beginning to the end, and no footprints that came in could be seen. And the footprints are very shallow. www.mentalnovel.com. It doesn't look like it's carrying the weight of a corpse at all, but rather like the corpse got up on its own, and sneaked away with a cat on its waist. Over there, it's going to the via. William stopped thinking and followed the footprints quickly. The heavy rain had not completely covered up the footprints, and he was still able to identify the direction. He didn't know why he wanted to come back and take a look at Bill's body, but he did it because of some ghosts and gods. He had an intuition that this matter might be important to him. Following all the way, the footprints disappeared on the seashore. William stood there blankly. He turned to the left and looked at the old hull of the via. The distance was no more than 200 meters in a straight line. What about people? Or the corpse? Throw the corpse into the sea. William stared blankly at his pale face in the sea, and his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't understand why someone would move Bill's body to Shanghai, and what was the point of doing so. It's not Yerlin and Fick, and it can't be the first officer's person. It can only be done by Captain Via's people, but why? At this point, William can be sure that what Yerlin said just now was not deceiving himself. Although he believed it 80% just now, at this moment, the last bit of luck in his heart was washed away by the cold sea water. He looked down at the sea, as if he saw Bill's body sinking on the bottom of the sea not far away, his eyes staring straight at him, and the via in the distance was like a monster with a big mouth. Bill, I don't want to die. William clenched his fists tightly, and his blood-red eyes were full of madness and viciousness. In the sea, a pair of eyeballs stared at him. Senpai, ruthless. Stepping on the old shipboard made a crunch, and the property was thrown to the ground and made a crack-dang clang. All the plundered wealth was gathered at the bow of the ship, and then counted and transported into the captain's cabin. Captain Via stood at the door and personally oversaw the scene. The folds on his face were squeezed into the corners of his eyes and nose, and his mouth made a strange laugh like a night owl. Fick got on the boat and threw his sack on the deck, Yerlin followed behind, and the purse in his hand threw an arc and hit the sack with a slap. Oh, a crisp and pleasant voice. Via's ears twitched, he raised the brim of his hat slightly, and his black and white eyes swept past Yerlin's body. Yarlin lowered his head, his voice extremely humble, all wealth belongs to the great Captain Via. Ho ho ho! With a greedy laughter, Via's eyes shifted to Yerlin again. Yarlin, you finally got something back, it seems that your illness has recovered, so I can rest assured already. It all depends on the kindness of the captain, otherwise Yerlin's life would have been buried in the sea. Yerlin was grateful, but a pair of eyes quietly swept over the dead-cheeked, expressionless first mate Luo Wei. There was William hiding not far behind Ro. His head was lowered, as if he wished he could crawl to the ground. From Yerlin's position, only William's bloodless profile could be seen. Oh, it's not bad to raise chi, that's fine. Yerlin grinned slightly, revealing a few white teeth. He half turned his head and looked at Luo Wei with a half smile. His expression was like in the provocation, hurry up and expose in public that I killed Bill and Chart. Humph. Luo Wei's face twitched, his eyes flashed fiercely, and he forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart. The more fearless and provocative Yerlin behaved, the more he had to beware of the captain's trick. Don't be impulsive, I'm not ready, it's not the time to tear my face with Via. Lo has always prided himself on being rational and calm, and of course he can't be fooled by the captain's little tricks, and, Via his secret is. Yes, I guessed right, Via he is impatient, after all. The unpleasant laughter, like sanding and polishing rust, interrupted Lo's thoughts, and it was Captain Via's surly voice, ha ha ha, I always believed that you could survive that disease tenaciously, Yerlin, we are pirates, we may be swallowed by the sea and killed by the enemy, but we will never be overwhelmed by disease, Yerlin, you have done well. Yes, just as I always believed that you are a great captain. Yarlin clenched his right fist to cover his chest, expressing high respect. The captain has counted everything, the total is. A pirate wearing a black hood walked over in 3 or 2 steps, his mouth was close to Via's ear, and his voice was very low. Yerlin's line of sight followed, with a black hood, a stooped figure, 2 thick palms, and an old-fashioned flintlock pistol on his waist. It was Moore, the oldest pirate on the ship, and also Wei, Captain Asia's most trusted person. Via nodded, of course he wouldn't tell the other pirates the exact number, but the raised eyebrows on his face were enough to show that this was another big harvest. So, who else hasn't come back? Via's crutched sword touched the ground lightly, and then his right hand flicked randomly, and the crutched sword stabbed out with a chirp, like a poisonous snake foraging. Like lightning, a silver object on the ground flew up, and then, with a slight twist of his wrist, everyone didn't even have time to see the movement, and they heard a small crisp sound of click, and a silver line was drawn in the air. Curve. Yerlin's pupils shrank suddenly, something was flying towards him, he instinctively raised his hand to grab it, a silver chain hung on the edge of his palm, he opened his palm, and his suddenly tense nerves immediately relaxed. It is a silver pocket watch. He pressed on the end of the watch, and the pocket watch popped open, revealing a photo inside that was stained red with blood, a family photo. The man's face had been covered by blood, and only the faces of a woman and a boy could be seen vaguely. Yerlin's pupils returned to normal after a momentary change. He didn't care about the blood on the watch chain, but hid it in his arms like a baby, with a look of surprise on his face, and even more honey on his mouth. The generous captain praises you. But I secretly cursed in my heart, fuck, scare me. With his humble and flattering face, he looked at the pirates around him with a look of disgust, but he acted without caring. Via waved his hand to interrupt Yerlin's chattering praise, and then lowered the brim of his hat. This seemed to be a habitual action of his, and he often liked to touch his hat before speaking. First mate, who hasn't come back? Via asked. Lo let out a soft breath, glared hard at Gansiver, who was about to speak, and walked out with heavy steps, almost squeezing a sentence between his teeth, Bill and Chard are dead. The boat suddenly fell silent. The raindrops hit the deck and the mast, and Lo raised his head halfway, his sad bloodshot eyes staring at the face of Via, who raised his hat and turned around. His eyes seemed to collide in the air. Lo didn't see any emotional changes in the captain's eyes, only the same coldness as always. There were only brief muscle twitches on the face as stiff as a dead face. The meaning of expressions. Probably surprise, or expected treacherous. Who knows, Lo is not a master of expression. From the corner of Luo Wei's peripheral vision, he glanced at Yerlin again, and this glance made his heart throb. Unlike the lively clown just now, Yerlin was expressionless at the moment, looking at his nose and nose. Looking at the heart, the eyes are very blank. You are at a loss, MMP, don't you have any doubts about who killed the person? Dead. Via's voice raised an octave. Lo retracted his gaze, his voice was as cold as a piece of ice that would never melt for 1,000 years, and his voice full of murderous intent was like a poisonous snake swallowing snake letters, making people shudder. Oh, poor Bill and Chart are on the Via pirate ship. The old man, but this time they had to go ashore. William found the dismembered bodies of Bill and Chart after they were killed, and the bodies were difficult to piece together, and William buried them on the spot. Who killed it? Via's eyes were ruthless under the brim of his black hat. He moved the crutched sword leaning on his side to him, and the crutched sword made a harsh rubbing sound on the deck. Fick's breathing became unnaturally rapid, and Yerlin's eyelids drooped, almost squinting into a gap, and no one could see the emotional fluctuations in his eyes. Officer Lowe, this is your last chance to directly identify me. If you miss it. Yerlin pressed the tip of his tongue against his closed teeth. The initiative is not in your hands. That's right, as long as Ro dares to identify Yerlin at this time, then Yerlin is in a mortal situation, and no evidence is needed at all, because Luo Ei is the first officer, and Yerlin is just a low-level crew member in the face of the whole crew. As long as Captain Via's IQ is online, no matter how eloquent Yerlin is, it can't change the fact that the captain has to trust the first mate, and it is more likely that he will not even have a chance to defend himself. Yes, he was pierced through the heart by the captain's ruthless sword, and took the pocket watch back by the way. However, Yerlin was certain that Lowe would not dare www.mtlnovel.com, because if he asked William to bring it back, as well as the disappearing corpses of Bill and Chart, all created a tangible truth for Lowe. That is all. This is a conspiracy carefully designed by the captain, just waiting for him to jump in. As long as he opens his mouth to identify Yerlin, a charge of framing the crew will fall on him. Because he couldn't take out the bodies of Bill and Charter, and what was even more terrifying was that the crime of killing Bill and Charter would be framed on him instead. Captain Via, you underestimate me too much. I won't be blinded by anger. On the contrary, I'm very happy to see you start to prepare to attack me. The more you can't wait, the closer the day is. Let's be patient at the end. Lowe's thoughts turned sharply, his face was just right with grief in his grief, his tone was heavy and calm. I don't want to admit it, but I have to say that the one who killed Bill and Chart, the scum, is on this ship. Yes, it's unbelievable, the people who killed Bill and Chart are among us. Lowe's eyes swept across the uproar of pirates, especially at Yerlin's squinting eyes. Captain Ya's unwavering eyes stayed for a moment before he said awe-inspiringly, William saw the back of the scum, and he finally ran on the Via. Bastard, we are brothers on the same boat, and someone would treat him. My brother started, you don't deserve to live on the Via. I swear by the name of the Via, I will find you on the ship, and then smash you to pieces. Let your blood stain the Via 1 inch of boat board, let everyone in the whole boat eat your meat raw. I think it's a smart performance. However, the blood of one person can't cover the whole board of the boat. Yerlin's half-squinted eyes were filled with murderous secrets, his tongue was firmly against his teeth, and he struggled to hold back his mouthpiece. Suppressed sneer. The rusty iron cables hooked on the heavy triangular anchors twitched and made a crack-clap sound, and the old Via hull shook with a sour squeezing sound, giving people a feeling that it would capsize in the next second. The illusion of capsize. The pitch-black sea swayed like silky satin. The pirates who lifted anchor and sailed on the deck swayed up and down involuntarily, but the soles of their feet were firmly rooted on the boat. This broken ship is really rotten, and I'm really afraid that it will suddenly fall apart one day. The bearded pirate pulled the rope with both arms, and the other two pirates struggled to fix the anchor on the frame, and their mouths also couldn't stop. Live complaints, this broken ship is our captain's treasure. I heard the boatman say that every time the Via is damaged, the captain asks him to restore it to its original state, no matter its size, or placement. The orientation of the location is required to remain intact, so the Via is exactly the same as when it set sail on the first day, except that it is getting more and more broken. Oh, this is really bad. One of the pirates untied his trousers belt and released water to the sea, his eyes suddenly blinked, and then widened again, wondering, there is a shadow under the boat, is it a reef? There's nothing. Another pirate stuck his head out of the boat and looked down. You're dazzled, oh, you on the boat, you idiot. The pirate who released the water shrugged his shoulders indifferently, looked around, and when he found no one, the corners of his mouth sank, and he lowered his voice and asked sneakily, are you saying what the first officer said is true? Bill and Shatner. 2 are dead, and the murderer is on the boat. Bill and Chart must be dead, otherwise, they wouldn't have been on the ship yet. Another pirate with a stern look interjected, his tone was also gloomy, apart from corpses on this island, there is no corpse. If people want to stay, then the murderer is of course on the boat, in my opinion, I am afraid it is the captain, don't talk, someone is coming. Several pirates kept silent, looked at each other thoughtfully, and observed a chilling coolness in each other's expressions. In the era of the great pirates, pirates are like crucian carp crossing the river, and there are as many as the hair of a cow. Basically, a person can successfully change jobs with a knife, and the prerequisites for navigators are extremely harsh, and proper high-end talents are distributed in the sea. The density of the pirates can simply be moved by a group of pirates who are looking for life. Drawing a chart? Determine the route? Label the coordinates? Predict the weather? What are these? They don't exist at all. For everyone in the Via Pirates, once the ship leaves the island, basically the island can no longer exist. Anyway, as long as the island disappears from their sight, it really disappeared completely, and they have no chance of finding it for the rest of their lives. As for saying that this is meant to belittle the Via Pirates, of course it is not necessary, because, similar to this pirate group occupies more than 90% of the pirate base, in this group of real adventure in the eyes of home, he is a great navigator who can drive the ship away from the dock without capsizing in heavy rain. Therefore, in Yerlin's eyes, the 2-month voyage was like a gamble with his life. If he was not careful, he might get lost in the sea forever, and then starve to death on the ship. Even if this is not a dangerous sea area as unpredictable as the Great Route, but at best a corner of the East China Sea, Yerlin is definitely not willing to put his life on this kind of roulette table. The act of giving and receiving is completely disproportionate, and Yerlin hates it, just as he looks at the cramped and narrow space in the cabin with disgust at the moment. It is a wrapped keel, and the corridors on both sides of the keel have been roughly transformed into cabins. In the dark space with a length of 30 meters, a width of 3 meters and a height of less than 2 meters, pieces of inferior wooden boards are fixed. The wooden boards are covered with dirty bedding with a dirty color. The whole cabin is filled with a strange smell. That is a special smell mixed with athlete's foot, sweat, musty and damp water vapor. Yerlin was lying on the bed near the door with a pale face. Although he was as close to the cabin door as possible, the broken door was thankfully shattered, and cold wind and rain came in from the outside, but he still couldn't stop the terrifying phenomenon. The smell permeated his nose and mouth all the time. The flickering oil lamps were quickly blown out, and the cabin was plunged into darkness. A few pirates playing cards mumbled cursingly, then dispersed and crawled back to their beds. All kinds of purring, one after another like a tireless symphony. This kind of harsh environment can be compared to the fact that Yerlin was abducted and sold by smugglers, human traffickers, when he was young in his previous life. He was also locked in the cabin. www.mtlnovel.com. The same dark and closed space was crowded with people. It was really a period of time. Angry memories. He leaned on his side and closed his eyes slowly, forcing himself not to pay attention to the smell in his mouth and nose. His body had to feel the bedboard swaying with the bumps of the boat. He tried his best to up his ears while listening to the movement in the cabin. On the other hand, he was thinking about the next plan. William is already in the trap, and as long as I make a little arrangement, he will be completely chained by me. The first mate thinks he is smarter than I thought, and smart people know how to restrain reckless impulses, so that the scale of my original plan it can be a little bigger. For example, the number of people who died tonight can be changed from 1 to 2, 3 is better. Yerlin's ears twitched slightly, his brows were frowning, and there were 3 snoring sounds away from him. Too close, it seems especially annoying. The most worthy of attention is Captain Via. There is no doubt that he is the strongest person on the ship. In addition, he gives me an indescribable sense of weirdness. And Bill and Cha, what is the captain's secret that Te said before his death? This should be a game between the first mate and the captain, and I need to try it out, which will affect my priority sequence for dealing with the first mate and the captain. This is like a game where the roles of the prey and the hunter are interchanged. Each is hiding his thoughts and actions, waiting for an opportunity to launch a deadly attack. However, there is a viper disguised as a branch curled up in the corner. He was hungry and licking his sinister fangs, deciding which fresh meat to eat first. Order is important. Yerlin's breathing became more and more steady, he felt his head swaying more and more heavily, his eyelids seemed to become dizzy. With pervasive smell and symphony of sleeping, is he going to fall asleep? Snoring. This is a rectangular, empty room. Above the head, cool white light slants down and converges on the white projection curtain. Next to the curtain stood a straight middle-aged man, in a flat police uniform that was ironed, and his short hair showed a capable appearance, especially a pair of eyes staring at the projection showed a sharp and dazzling light. As if to pierce directly through the veil to a real place. Chu Binwen, male, Han nationality, 41 years old, a Chinese citizen, the chairman of our city Rongli Co., Limited, and the legal person of Chihu New Technology Company. On the projection is a photo of a thin-faced middle-aged man standing at a press conference, with short, finely chopped and neatly polished hair, wearing golden-rimmed glasses, a straight nose, and a faint smile on his thin lips. Judging from the photo alone, this person has a friendly and elegant innocuous temperament, but from the bottom row, sitting upright, there are many high-level police officers and provincial leaders' solemn expressions, which is enough to show that this public image can only be named Chu Binwen. Man in disguise. There is no need to say these things on the surface, say something we don't know. An official of the Provincial Confidential Department with a face that looked like he had swallowed a fly dung interjected. He could not imagine how an outstanding entrepreneur in the province could do it. He turned into a vicious criminal, even registered in the Interpol. Chu Binwen is also the largest shareholder of Zhuyao Group behind the scenes, the real owner of Wixin Shipping Logistics Company, and the actual owner of Telford Logistics and Jiaxi Logistics, which means that all the largest logistics companies in our province and the surrounding 3 provinces are all belong to one person. On the surface, this is just a way of capital operation, but secretly, this is indeed the protective color of the largest armed smuggling group in my country and Southeast Asia. Several police officers distributed stacks of thick documents to the leaders below. These documents were collected, confirmed, and confirmed by their local police and international police for 5 years. The information was printed on A4 paper. The first page was a colloidal photo. At the same time, the photo on the projector was also switched over. It was the profile of a man in military uniform sitting on an armed off-road vehicle. According to, with broken black hair and a smile on the corner of his mouth, he could vaguely tell that Chu Binwen was the same person, but the whole person gave off a fierce aura. Zhang Yunyan, the son of a fisherman in the coastal areas of our country, went fishing with his father at the age of 14. He was spared a sea accident and drifted to the beach in Hong Kong. He survived, and was taken back to Yuzhai by the local drug lord Barlow because of his ferocity and tenacity. 4 years later, Zhang Yunyan was adopted by Barlow at the age of 18 as his adopted son. After that, he gradually took over part of Yuzhai's power and 2 teams in 5 hours. The people, and the other 3 names who designed to kill Barlow, eventually became the second person in the entire Yuzhai in one fell swoop, and thus began to be suspicious and suppressed by Barlow. 1 year later, on the 60th birthday of Barlow, he launched a coup and succeeded in ascending the throne. Holding all power in Yuzhai, he is 24 years old. In the next 4 years, he developed his power with great ambition and became one of the largest drug lords in Southeast Asia with his ruthless and cunning means. He escaped from an assassination attempt and fled back to China. The international police once thought that the general was dead and the forces of Yuzhai were destroyed. Until 5 years ago, they discovered a smuggling group nicknamed Ghost Face in Southeast Asia. Confirm that the general is not dead, but fled back to the mainland with fake death, and has been changing the face of the forces in the remote control Yuzhai and developing secretly. So, Chu Binwen is Zhang Wenyin? Asked in a low voice. Yes, we didn't find out at first. After all, the identities of the two people are too different. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are very different. Moreover, according to the information, one is blind and the other has perfect eyesight, until we started the investigation 2 years ago. All the patients who have undergone eye replacement surgery in China in the past 10 years, Chu Binwen has gradually entered our field of vision. The difficulties and twists and turns in the middle will not be mentioned, but we can now 100% confirm that the generals, Ghost Faces, Chu Binwen, and Zhang Yunyan are all the same person. Hey, he sucked in a breath, and then an official patted the document on the table to vent his anger. So, how did a drug lord, a smuggler, become a successful entrepreneur? The escalation of criminal methods, the combination of money and force, a more concealed way of committing crimes, a more brief and efficient method, the use of threats, inducements, bribery, murder, and accidents, as well as a series of meticulous criminal ideas about human nature, as well as a group of victims. Bewitching and brainwashing criminals, trading, infiltrating, stealing, and doing everything they can. If it wasn't for the accidental discovery of Chu Binwen, I'm afraid we would not have known that such a terrifying evil force has been hiding in our province until now. The scene turned, the arraignment room of the city's #1 prison, in a cold and cramped environment, an iron chair with chains and shackles attached, with deeply sunken eye sockets. The pale Chu Binwen opened his eyes and looked at the policeman who pushed open the iron door. At that moment, the eyes revealed by the closing of the eyelids were not disguised, but calm and cold. Officer Hong, we meet again. There was exhaustion in his hoarse voice. Chu Binwen licked his dry lips as if he were meeting an old friend. Your verdict has come. Officer Hong paused. She wanted to see the look of fear on the other side, but unfortunately, she was disappointed. Death. She said. Of course. Chu Binwen replied. You don't appeal. If you win, you will take it all. If you lose, you must admit it. This is the rule. Rules? You are also worthy of obeying the rules. How many laws have you violated? How many people have been killed? How many people have lost their lives, and their wives have been separated? You. Officer Hong looked at the other side's face that looked down on life and death, and looked very angry and excited. Officer Hong, you're too excited. It's not good. After all, this may be our last conversation. Chu Binwen's voice was still calm and indifferent. Phew, yes, this is our last conversation, and your execution date is tomorrow. Officer Hong opened the verdict, presented it to Chu Binwen, and asked the most perplexing question in his heart, why did you choose me to come with you? Conversation. As expected, it seems that many people want me to die soon. Chu Binwen sneered, then retracted the senseless ridicule in his heart, and stared at Officer Hong seriously. Sorry, there are some distractions. Oh, why did you choose you? Because you are going to die. You will feel better if you find someone who is pleasing to the eye to talk to and confess your guilt. Well, your eyebrows and eyes are very similar to my mother's. She is a kind and weak woman. Officer Hong was stunned, exhaled a long breath, and then looked at Chu Binwen's eyes unconsciously softened a little. To answer your question just now, whether you are bathed in sunlight or in a dark world, you are bound by rules. The difference is that they reject the light and choose to embrace the darkness, and I happen to have the ability to make decisions in the dark. Rules. Chu Binwen blinked his sour eyelids. I have never forced others to make choices, those who come to me are all following their own desires, and I just make a fair exchange, they get them what I want, and when I need help, they should pay back their friendship, and those my enemies, I never choose them, but they choose to be my enemy because of greed, jealousy, and stupidity. I thought I was a lamb to be slaughtered, but in the end I found out that I was the most vicious one, so www.mtlnovel.com I sent them to where they should go. Chu Binwen wanted to spread his hand, but realized that his hand was tightly cuffed, so he spread out the palm of his hand, which gave people a sense of pride in holding the center of the world, and now, I lost, so I'm sitting here waiting for death to come. She didn't know how to refute Chu Binwen. She thought it was sophistry, so she remained silent and then asked, "You don't have the slightest repentance?" Confession. Chu Binwen laughed, the corners of his mouth grinned, his laughter became louder and more presumptuous. "Officer Hong, let me tell you a secret, your investigation data has left out a paragraph at the very beginning, the details about the death of my father and I at sea. It was a fisherman's fishing boat, and it was the kind of boat that was made of wood. Sailing boats, they got lost in the sea when they were carried by the waves. There was no water, no food. It has been 4 days. Do you know the taste of hunger, as if the flesh and blood of the whole body are burning, and every cell is gnawing? Eating one's own soul will seduce the greatest evil in a person's heart and turn a person into a naked beast." Chu Binwen stopped, his eyes were bloodshot. She took a step back, terrified. "You ate your father?" Chu Binwen's eyes returned to cold and calm, and his voice was indifferent like a piece of ice that would never melt. "He wanted to eat me, I struggled, resisted, and finally killed him, and then used his corpse to attract fish. In the end I ate the fish and he died in the belly of the fish." Yerlin suddenly opened his eyes. He stared blankly at the top of his head. The blue pupils reflected the darkness. After a long time, he straightened up from the swaying bed and felt this strange and flowery body again. Suppressed and hideous laughter, hee hee, hee 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 hee. People who have never died can never truly understand the great horror that death really represents, the loneliness and nothingness like the eternal night, and any language is pale and powerless to describe it. Whether it's because of God's disgust, or a gift from Satan, or as to vile. Yerlin licked his wet mouth, stared at his left hand with piercing eyes, and a thought in the back of his mind: there is a connection that appears, as if in the deep darkness, a shadow slowly emerges. "Bill." The low-pitched voice pierced through the rain screen and space, and was conveyed under the sea. In the shadow of the via, a figure was strangely attached to the bottom of the ship. I saw his chest tightly against the hull of the ship, and his 4 clawed fingernails were on the bottom of the ship. The ink sticks to the deck, and if you look closely, you can see where the ink is, but the black lines that are squirming like living things drilled through the gaps in the wood texture, entangled in them. At the moment when Yerlin whispered, a black line flashed in the human body's white eyeballs, and at the same time, all the black threads on his 4 claws shrank back to his limbs. It slipped back out, like a curled-up 4-clawed octopus. When it was about to leave the stern, the suction claws volleyed and grabbed the edge of the hull. Followed by a quick upward climb upside down. Drops of water dripped from the bald head, slid across the motionless nostrils, closed cheeks without the slightest shaking, only the pulsating chest was still pitifully trying to prove that it was a living creature. At the stern of the boat, Yarlin had come out from the bottom of the cabin and walked along the side of the boat. Then, the corners of his eyes twitched slightly, and he saw a rather frightening and speechless scene. The first thing that catches the eye are the 2 long straight legs, which swept across the edge of the boat abruptly, and then bent at a 90-degree angle that was completely unergonomic, and then the calf knees took over the movement and folded straight through the right angle, so the feet were stepping on the deck. The entire upper body is in the posture of a flat bridge, and then in the next second, the upper body exposed outside the boat bayou, like a bent spring suddenly rebounded, without any extra vibration. Stand upright in place. Transformation, transforming dead creatures into their own servants. The servants at this stage have no autonomous consciousness and can only accept the simplest instructions. A paragraph flashed in his mind, and the corners of Yerlin's mouth twitched involuntarily. He had a more accurate and clear understanding of the line of explanation of no self-consciousness and receiving simple instructions. God knows, he just sent Bill an order to go to the stern. Is it necessary to come up with such a weird and unusual way of appearing? He murmured in his heart, but in his mind he was quickly scrutinizing. The text explanation given by Asturbator was too brief, and he needed to personally verify many necessary links. For example, turning dead creatures into slaves is very irresponsible. Otherwise, why are Bill and Chet clearly dead? The former is obviously more tragic, but the former is successfully transformed, while the latter, the body is preserved. Perfect but unsuccessful. The precondition is that the deceased needs to send a black silk before the transformation. The deadline for this time point is temporarily to be determined as the heart stops beating. Yerlin recalled that before Bill's death, he stabbed his finger into the other's heart, and the investigation in particular, the corpse was touched after the corpse was cool. It's not fresh when it's cold, so it's because of picky eaters? Pretending to be a normal human being. Yerlin pouted and gave the order. Bill didn't react at all. Obviously, the 6-word command was too complicated. This was expected by Yerlin. He immediately decomposed the command, pretend. Still no response. There is no self-consciousness, so there is no room for free play. Yerlin observed Bill's expression, the nostrils on his cheeks twitched without breathing, his lips were stiff and closed, and his eyelids had not been closed for 1 minute. There is no natural vibrating life activity on the entire cheek, including the pores, as if the facial features on that cheek are just meaningless piles of extravagance and have no value in existence. Breathe. There is no response. Bill is more accurate to say that the black silk parasite has no concept of breathing. Close your eyes. Bill did. Open your eyes. No problem. The nose is shaking. The lips tremble. Squat down, stand up. The left ear lobe is bent 90 degrees back, and the right little finger is turned 360 degrees. Yerlin quickly gave instructions, observed the feedback, and gradually came to the diagnosis result in his heart. Being bound in a human body, covered with human skin, is essentially out of the human species category, and can control every inch of the body's bones and muscles, make movements that violate ergonomic behavior. It will damage the body. Bones and muscles still serve as important functions of support and connection. Black silk has a replacement function, but it lacks strength. Bill's left ear lobe is bent, with a bruise in the middle, which is a muscle cartilage injury, while the right little finger is more obvious. The whole little finger is broken from the joint, the exposed superficial skin shows twisted ecchymosis, bones and muscles are completely broken, weakness. Hanging, with black threads interspersed in the middle. The head of the little finger is hung in the air by a puppet with a thread, and then the black silk is pulled up little by little, sticking to the wound, but that's all. The fracture of the bones and muscles obviously makes it no longer able to support activities. Yerlin's eyes fell on Bill's chest. He seemed to be able to see that Bill's heart was replaced by a tangle of threads. In his mind, he imagined a grotesque and frightening picture, with countless black threads interspersed through it. Muscles and bones are woven into a huge cobweb, and the internal organs of the liver, spleen, and stomach are randomly squeezed into shriveled waste like garbage. Unfortunately, there is only one transformed body at present. Otherwise, we can dissect it to get a more intuitive observation. A chilling thought arose in Yerlin's mind. www.mentalnovel.com. A deep understanding of his own ability, among which the smaller the deviation and misjudgment, the better the performance of the ability, the less the accident occurs, and the accident often means an unbearable price. This is Yerlin's philosophy of existence, especially after he died once. He needs to be more rigorous and strict with himself. Compared with Bill's death, the strength of muscles and bones has not been enhanced, but if used as disposable consumables, flexibility can be regarded as passive fullness, plus the sublimation of will, not afraid of death in pain. Yerlin squeezed Bill's soft and cold arm, and finally showed a satisfied smile on his face. Even if it can only be mechanically and rigidly execute simple instructions, it is enough to deal with the next situation. The combat power of one transformant is enough to kill 3 to 5 pirates. The Vaya pirates have a total of 47 pirates, including the captain. In theory, there are 10 more transformants. I can handle them well enough. Of course, it would be a waste to use them all as consumables. Yerlin calculated and deduced in his heart, but he and Bill hid in the dark corner of the stern and continued to carry out some final tests. Repeat my words. Yerlin meditated in his heart. He is now enough to confirm that his connection with the transformant comes from a conscious connection, and this connection is likely to ignore the limitations of spatial distance. Of course, he will find an opportunity to conduct more precise and detailed tests to verify this. He continued to meditate in his heart intermittently, and from time to time he carefully observed the deck with his head sideways. The rain was beating on the dilapidated deck, and the other captain's cabin was closed in the distance. There is light. The crude round wooden table made a rubbing sound of kaiji, jiji all the time with the shaking of the boat. The dirty oil lamp on the table flickered on and off, reflecting the uncertain face next to it. Captain Vaya sat on the edge of the bed, stepping barefoot on the short chair next to him, next to the black flat round hat, and leaning against the side of the bed to ensure that he could reach the sword as soon as he raised his hand. Handle. At a distance of 3 meters across from him, Old Moore slightly bowed his body and nodded his head slightly, so that his eyes would not look straight at the captain with his eyes closed, but instead focus on the chair at the captain's feet. Like a humble housekeeper, more than a vicious and cunning pirate. Bill and Chart are indeed not on the boat, they should really be dead. Moore showed doubts in his eyes, and his voice hesitated. Captain, you. Moore, it's not me, if it's what I mean, I'll tell you. Vaya interrupted Moore's question. It's the last minute, I don't need to make extra troubles. Lo wants to take my place, the Vaya is just for him. Since it's not the captain's order, the people below will definitely not dare to do it privately, so who would it be? A cold light flashed in Moore's cloudy eyes. The pirates on the Vaya can be divided into 3 types. One was brought on board by Lo and bought over the past 2 years. They are considered as Loe's diehards. There are about 13 people, one is our people, including me, a total of 19 people. The last one is not the captain's diehard, who was also not drawn over by Ro, can be regarded as neutral, and there are 14 people left, but if you do it properly, these people will not dare to rebel against your command, so they can also be our people on the spot. Add up to a total of 33 people, and we have more than twice as many people as Lo. Although I don't know who killed Bill and Chart this time, it did us a favor. There are fewer Rows, so why don't we take this opportunity to kill Lo to avoid future troubles? Moore showing his stinking yellow teeth, he made a murderous proposal. Vaya seemed to be moved, but after a while he sighed, it's not right. Captain. Moore was anxious. Listen to me, first, Lo is very smart and cautious. We have never been able to find a reasonable reason to attack Lo. The captain kills the first mate just because of suspicion. This is unrealistic, and it is difficult to ensure that those neutral will people think of Luo Wei because of this. Maybe Luo Wei is waiting for me to do something. Secondly, Luo Wei's people are definitely not only this, the people below are very dissatisfied with my stinginess in the past 2 years. If it is not for my tough wrist shocked, I am afraid that they have already reversed, and Luo Wei has bought people's hearts, this positive and negative. Those neutral people must be more inclined to Luo Wei's side, and there are no secret thoughts among our people. Lo's, I don't think so. In fact, the only person I can really trust on this ship is you, Moore. Vaya. Muir was very moved, with a look of nostalgia on his face. my life was saved by the master back then. Since the master is gone, you are the only heir of the master. No matter what decision you make, will always be by your side. More, I understand. Vaya waved his hand and opened a pair of cold eyes. You can be regarded as the only relative I have left, but unfortunately, I am not as good as my father. Fear can play a role. It's a temporary effect, but it can't last. But unfortunately I don't have much time, so I have to be so greedy and stingy, otherwise, I may not be able to conquer all the crew on the Vaya. It's just a group of pirates, the captain doesn't need to regret it, their combined lives are not comparable. Moore was excited, and his face showed an angry expression. He was angry with these pirates like a head when feeding unfamiliar wolves. You must always beware of these beasts biting back at their masters. Forget it, this is the end of the matter, there is no need to mention it again. Vaya held the hilt of the sword with his right hand, and his voice became as cold as the blade of a sword. Anyway, we will finally have to wait for this day. If Lo is wise, Vaya give it to him, otherwise, you will have to pay tribute to the Vaya with his head. Understood. Moore nodded heavily, not questioning Vaya's decision, but puzzling another question. So, is what Lo said true? Who would have killed Bill and Chart? It doesn't matter if it's true or not. We had a decision in his heart, he didn't plan to struggle with this kind of problem. If it's true and it doesn't damage us, it's Lo's problem. We just wait and see what happens. If it's fake, if it's a trap and conspiracy, then wait until the end and kill them all together. Moore completely understood Vaya's intentions. After all, after so many years of hard planning, he finally had to wait for success to come. Any twists and turns in the slightest were unbearable for Vaya. He didn't want to bear any possible losses. Steady, for which he is willing to make some other concessions and compromises. Vaya's state at this time is like the bat locked in the cage in the captain's room. Reading www.yukanshu.com's hunger and restraint suppress its ferocity, it is waiting to be released into the light, or it will smash the iron cage at the end, and come to a gluttonous feast. I swear, every crew member on the Vaya Pirates, you won't want to see that scene. Moore respectfully said good night, turned off the oil lamp, turned to leave the captain's room, and then closed the door tightly. He didn't notice that at the moment when the light in the captain's room was turned off, in the corner of the stern, a head turned out and half of his head was just looking over, and his white lips soaked in rain drew a dangerous arc. Yo, the lights are finally out. Vaya is the person with the highest force on the ship. In order to show his due respect, Yarlin deliberately set the first night's hunting plan until the other party fell asleep, which would be more secure. Yarlin stretched out his tongue and licked his lips. Behind him, Bill stood motionless. The night was shrouded in darkness, as if a ghost was gradually waking up, slowly opening its mouth. After waiting for a full quarter of an hour, Yarlin stretched and then slowly crept back to the lower cabin. Behind him, Bill followed step by step. The sound of the rain curtain perfectly obscured their footsteps. The cabin door was closed, and the hole on the left under the door was still blowing wind. Yarlin stood at the door, squatted down slowly, put his face to the hole, and looked inside. After a while, he stood up and carefully and slowly pushed the door halfway open. The door was pushed open, the turbid hot air inside collided with the cold air outside, and the wind became more violent for a while. Yarlin walked in and hid behind the hidden door. He took off his gloves and threw it casually. Snapped. The wet gloves hit a pirate sleeping on his back in the face.